I posted this illustration of these little snowmen ice skating on my social media, and one of my friends who was admiring my imagination said that she didn't have any imagination and she could only paint what she can see. And I wanted to address that in this video. If you're somebody who feels like you can only paint what you see, then I'd like to talk to you about building up that skill of drawing from imagination, because it is a skill and there are ways that we can draw on resources to put something together. I'm Heather Nelson, and if you end up finding this video helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. I could probably make an entire series about this topic, about building up your creative muscle for drawing from imagination and getting inspiration. And if you're interested in that, please drop that in the comments below. But for now, let's just talk about where this particular painting came from. Though maybe before I jump right into that, I should talk about that idea of drawing what you actually see. That's a really important part of the whole phase of building up drawing from imagination, is first draw enough from reference, from things that you see in your environment, maybe from pictures, because the more you draw from actual reference in what you see, the more that's going to be in your memory and in your muscle memory. Like if you draw a lot of birds from photos of birds or from birds that you see out at the bird feeder, then when you try to draw them from imagination, you're going to have a much better skill set of oh yeah, that's how a bird looks. That's what the basic shapes of a bird are. This is how a bird moves. So I think that's the first step, is actually do draw from what you see. The more you draw from what you see, the easier it's going to be to draw from imagination. Okay, back to this particular illustration. Now, number one, this illustration is actually in response to a prompt that I got on a social media challenge. So the prompt was Victorian Christmas. Now that already narrows things down. Now we're trying to think about something that might represent Victorian Christmas. So we need, right away my brain was like, okay, I gotta have some Victorian era clothing in this illustration, probably an activity that, what people would have done in the Victorian era, or maybe animals would have done. And I was also thinking this setting should look kind of old style, right? So that narrowed it down. And you can definitely get prompts. I mean, social media is absolutely full of prompts, but if you don't want to go to social media, you can literally pull, sticky notes with some different ideas out of a jar and put that all together. One of the best things we can do for inspiration as well is to draw on memory and our own story. So I spent some time in my childhood growing up in tiny town in Alberta, Canada, on the prairies, and we lived on lakefront property, and it would get really cold in the winter and the ice would freeze over, and my dad would actually clear a little skating rink for me down in front of our house, and so I could go down and skate anytime that I wanted, which I did in hockey skates. And if this story is sounding a little bit like a Canadian stereotype, well, I really do fit the Canadian stereotype. And I remember how, so we would have these little skating rinks in front of the properties on the lake. And then sometimes they would actually clear a path from one skating rink to another. And so the path would actually link up around the lake. And I just have these amazing memories of skating, by myself and also with family members around the lake, both on our own skating rink and then on this path. And I have so many good memories of it. So skating gives me a warm, fuzzy feeling. And I knew going into this illustration, I wanted to create that feeling of joy and connection and fun. Also, when I went skating down on my own little rink in my hockey skates, I had zero training for figure skating, but I would pretend I was a figure skater, doing these beautiful twirls, which really weren't beautiful because A, I had no training, and B, I was in hockey skates, which really weren't made for figure skating, but I had quite weak ankles. I needed the support from the hockey skates. And so I almost think that that's a little bit like a snowman. Would a snowman really be graceful and elegant while they were figure skating? I doubt it. I highly doubt it. And that was me. I wasn't graceful and elegant. So you know what? I think I was a lot like a little snow person skating out there. But the important thing was I was having fun. And the important thing when you're practicing illustrating and painting is that you're having fun too. It doesn't matter whether it looks professional. What matters is that you're having a good time. I did think that people skated during the Victorian era, but double checked. So I Googled that and was like, hey, did people skate during the Victorian era? Of course they did. And there was plenty of images of people skating. So that was great to see. And I had also made a Christmas card a couple years ago for my mom, and it involved snowmen skating, and it was kind of a fun challenge. So when I'm thinking about that, the first thing I do is kind of like try to model up like what would like human stick figures look like if they were skating. And then I put a big old snowman body on those stick figures. And that's how I create the idea of like snowmen skating. And then I looked up some Victoria era clothing. Like I had my own ideas in mind of what I might think that Victorian era clothing looked like. I mean, many of us have watched Bridgerton, right? So we know those types of clothes, but I did do a Google, like I wanted kind of like a little capelet for the female snow figure, and I was thinking top hat for the snowman, because doesn't every snowman have a top hat anyway? And I just I Googled some images, and then that was how I like researched. Like I would Google gentlemen's Victorian era clothing, and then that gave me ideas. And now I can make my drawing more accurate, because now I am drawing from reference, but I'm also changing it because now I'm putting it on a snowman, and of course the lighting is going to be different. That's where imagination and some education also comes into play, like when you've drawn enough and you start to kind of understand how your light source might work and like shadow. So that's a skill that you can build up, and that's less about imagination and more about practicing. When it came to the setting, I knew I wanted an outdoor pond setting because that was like very much in my memories. And besides, I doubt there was a lot of indoor rinks back in the Victorian era. So, of course, and besides, why would snowmen be skating inside? We could ask ourselves why snowmen would be skating at all, but let's not do that. We're just instead going to think to ourselves, they're not going to be in an indoor skating rink, they're going to be in an outdoor pond. And I wanted that pond to be really beautiful, and that's again where I decided to go for reference. So now I go like on royalty-free images, and I look and I find frozen ponds, and I also found some ponds that weren't frozen. And so actually this particular background setting was taken from Pixabay, which is a royalty-free reference photo area, and the pond wasn't frozen. It's just I really liked like the little buildings in behind it, and I liked the setting. So I'm now using reference because I'm drawing that church from a church that I'm actually seeing. So I'm not really drawing it from imagination, although I did tweak it a little bit. I changed like kind of some parts of the structure and like where the windows and the doors were. And also there had been a little town right behind where the snowmen were, and I considered putting the town in, but then I just thought it would be too distracting. I really wanted us to be able to focus on these two snow figures, like looking at each other and the connection they had and their cute little carrot noses. So I eliminated the town. And so when you're drawing from reference, you don't have to draw it as exactly as you see. You're allowed to like pick and choose the elements that you like and the things that you might think make your painting look better. When I don't have a reference image, but I'm painting something relatively simple, like say the carrot on the nose of these snowmen, I'm just usually thinking about like simple values. So I actually have a YouTube video on understanding values a little bit better. But most objects, you can kind of take like 3 or 4 values and then you can actually make a simple object. So by that, I'm going to link the video up above. But what I mean by that is if you have a dark value, well, you're going to end up with some shadows. And if you've got like a medium value, well, that's going to be kind of your base color. And then if you have a lighter value, that's going to be your highlight. So for a carrot, even if I'm not looking at an image of a carrot, I kind of know like I need a light source. So I need an area of a lighter value. And then I need the shadow on the opposite side. And Shazam, I've got a little carrot nose, even though I actually didn't have a reference. But I have seen a lot of carrots in my life. I own horses, and they love the carrots. I actually completely changed the sky from my reference photo. I wanted a sky that had like more richness of color, and an artist I like to learn from on YouTube is Karen Margulis. You should check her out. And I was looking at some winter works that she was doing, and her underpainting looked like my sky. It wasn't actually like her finished sky didn't look like that, but that was like her initial underpainting colors. And I just loved how those colors paired and looked together. I thought that looked fantastic. She does such beautiful work. And so I kind of went with the underpainting as my actual sky and completely changed it from the reference photo. But again, I'm still using reference, but now it's reference from a video and not reference from an actual image. So like that's another place where you can get inspiration from, in the same way that you can get inspiration from real life. Like this happens to be a kind of sky that I see a lot when I look out the window here where we live in Cowichan Bay, and it's colors that I just really love in the sky. So I'm actually sort of combining what I'm seeing in real life from what I was also seeing in that video. While working on the church, I did have a reference, but I didn't stick too closely to it. Instead, I just kind of wanted the idea of a church. But the interesting thing was, as I was working on this little church, it started on taking a personality of its own. But it was disappointing to me because it looked a little bit sad, actually. So as time went on, I found that I wanted to change this church so it didn't look like a little sad individual all on its own. That I wanted it to try to look happy. Like I was like, how do you make a church smile? And I was thinking about maybe adding some shrubbery or something to do that. But I honestly didn't have the first idea how to do it. So over the duration of this painting, you are going to see that this church changes. Of course, the other challenge with the church was perspective. And perspective is one of those things that you think you understand it, and then you have to actually do a drawing, and then sometimes you find out you don't understand it as well as you think. I have a background in construction in my real life, and I do know how things go together, and yet still when I'm trying to paint them, they can look kind of funky. So this church was a challenge. Something else I concentrate on when I'm trying to draw from imagination is like, how do I want the color palette to look? So like, what color of the clothing should I have on this snow lady? And I want it to coordinate with the rest of the painting. So I want her clothing to match kind of like what he's wearing, but also elements in the background. With that in mind, I chose to give her feathers in her hat, which I just love feathers in an elaborate hat anyway. I wanted them to be rusty so that they would match the church and that would all tie in, and that would also work with their carrot noses. This little snow lady is going to look pretty amusing without a carrot nose. And when I'm trying to think about facial expressions, I think I do just kind of make that up on the fly. And if I don't quite like what I'm working with, then I'm going to just tweak it until I do. So I might open up the eye more or make the eye smaller. I might move the location around a little bit. There is a lot of trial and error going on there. And I was definitely thinking about contrast. I wanted to be able to see these carrot noses. I wanted them to kind of jump out from the background. So that's something I worked on over the course of this painting, considering there wasn't a reference. Working on the little capelet detail on the little snow lady's outfit, I really wanted it to match again with the feather in her hat, but I was also thinking about texture. So I was focused on creating kind of a woolen texture, and that was something that I just did again with multiple values, with like darks and with lights, and then I kind of made it like squiggle around with those different values, and that's what gave me a little texture on that capelet. There are always decisions to be made when you are working from imagination and not reference. So, for example, here I had to think about how much of each snow person would have actual Victorian clothing on them and how much of them would just be snow. So, there was a question in my mind about like, do I leave this lady's upper body with nothing covering it. Essentially, she's like a topless little snow lady. But then I was thinking, well, the snowman isn't wearing any pants. And these are the kind of things that like cartoon illustrations are allowed to do. But it still means that you have decisions to make when you're painting from imagination. And that's part of the challenge, but it's also part of the fun. People are usually really happy to help you as well. So in this case, I asked a friend what color I should make this dress. And I was kind of thinking too, like I presented some different options because I was thinking Christmassy colors. So I was thinking like a green or possibly like a purple burgundy to go with the hat. And I hadn't used a lot of green in the image yet, so I didn't know if it was like a mistake to bring in a new color. But when I polled my friends, then they thought green was a great idea. And so when you're kind of struggling and you're not really sure what to do, by all means, phone a friend. And sometimes also, like, I can use social media as a sounding board for that too. I might make a post on my social media and ask people, like, what are your opinions? What color should this be? Or should I add more of this or a little bit less of that? So it's not always 100% up to you. You don't have to shoulder all the responsibility of painting from imagination. Since I introduced that green into the Snow Lady's dress, then I really did want to bring that into some other areas. So I've added it into the background, but I've also incorporated it into the snowman's little cravat, tie, and also a little bit into his hat. You do want to echo colors around your image, and that's something you can keep in mind. Initially, I made the Snow Lady's skates black. I guess I was sort of caught up in thoughts of my own not figure skates, but hockey skates. And then I realized, oh no, a woman's figure skates are white. So then I've changed them to white. But, in Victorian era times, skates probably would have been the color of leather. So they probably would have been brown and maybe stained black, but they wouldn't likely have been white. But then Frosty the Snowman was a magical snowman, and these are likely magical snow people as well, and they can do and wear whatever they like. So there's always the question of like how much should be authentic and how much should just be made up. And so because I brought some of the colors from the Snow Lady into the Snowmen's outfit, then I decided to bring some of the colors from the Snowmen's outfit into the Snow Lady's outfit. And so that is why I have added this like blue belt. I didn't give much thought to the color of the snowman's skates, but I liked the way the dark color complemented his hat, and that really was all that I was probably thinking about. Since I decided that the church looked a little bit sad and melancholy, I decided that I was going to fuss about with it and try to make it look a little bit happier. I changed many things about the church, and just like some art, you can fuss about for a long time and it doesn't necessarily bring you to anything better, and I think this might be one of those examples. I also decided to change once again the color of the snowman's tie. I feel like that tie has gone through so many different colors, and I think as an artist, it is easy to overthink things and then overwork things, and I can put a lot of time in, but not, it's almost like I'm going around in circles. I don't necessarily bring anything better to it. But now I've brought in that rusty orange to the tie, but I still left some of the green. I just wanted to tie him in with everything else. Oh, that was punny. I did need to make a decision about my ice as well, because ice can be very smooth. It can look almost like water, or ice can be really rough and kind of have like a little layer of ice shavings or even a dusting of snow on it. So I just kind of played around with looks that I liked. But I did think about the fact that I wanted the ice to reflect a little bit of the world around it. Like I felt that the ice would show a little bit of the pink from the sky and possibly even a little bit of the trees. So I decided that I was going to reflect it a little bit. Like it would be shiny enough to cause a reflection. And I primarily decided to do that because I wanted to be echoing colors around. So that was a decision that I did make as an artist. And in every project I'm working on, I'm thinking about contrast. I mean, especially in something where I'm inventing what it looks like. But if I want that green dress to really stand out from the background, then I need to make quite light colored ice around it. Whereas around the snowman, his pants are light. So it's better to have some darker colors, like that kind of purpley shadow that you can see, so that his pants pop out from the background. Whenever I used to draw arms on figures, they would look so stiff and unnatural. And the funny thing about these snowmen is the arms are, in fact, sticks, but I actually think I achieved a little bit more of a natural look and like a natural drop to these arms than I typically do. So I was quite proud of myself, even though they're actually sticks and they probably didn't need to look soft, but I wanted to create like a feeling of like relaxed connection, and that really comes from practicing. That's something that I just practice sketching figures, because sketching humans is a task in itself. I'm way better at sketching animals, and so in this case, we are, I don't know, what would you call this? This is like a mix of, it's not an animal, it's not a human, it's a snowman, but anyway, it's practice. That's what I would advise for that. Perhaps a bit off topic, but I just loved how the soft tool blended for this ice surface. It really gave me that sort of smooth yet frozen look, and I really appreciate that about the soft tool. I added a little bit of rosy cheekness to this snowman because everyone gets flushed cheeks out in the cold, even snowmen. Now, this lady, she has been without an arm for a very long time. So, other than adding in all these little details, I really needed to add an arm. But I was kind of delaying because I was thinking about where I should put the arm. In the original sketch, I had her arm up where the church would be, and that would be, I think her arm would have got lost. Like, you wouldn't have noticed her arm, that, or it would have just been covering the church, and I thought the church was kind of cute. So I've changed the position of her arm, and I did look at a reference photo of some human skaters to get like an idea of how that arm would flow. If you're still with me at this point, I am very grateful. And I would like to say that learning how to draw from imagination really is a process. And it's something that I've improved a lot at, and also something that I could continue to improve on. I think the biggest things that I've really learned is that you don't have to do it all by yourself. You can draw in, reference from photos, from videos, from friends, from memories, and you've got this. You really do. You don't have to have an incredible imagination to make this possible for yourself, but I also believe that everybody does have imagination, and you just have to give yours permission to jot some things down and to get started.